I hear quiet, and I see quorum, and it's after 3:30. So we'll call this meeting to order. We have our friends from Global Affairs and DND here to brief us on the latest what's going on in Eastern Europe. And we look forward to what you have to say. I understand there's going to be one 5-minute statement from whomever, and then it'll be open to the members for the balance of the hour and a half to ask questions. Thereafter, colleagues, we're going to go in camera to discuss committee business, and we'll go from there. So with that, I'll call on, I'm not sure who, to give the Major General Prevost. Welcome. Good to see you in person.
Good to see you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for having us again. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, je suis le Major Général Paul Prévost. Je vous ai rencontré à plusieurs.
I am Major General Paul Prévost. I have met here with you many times. I am the Director of Staff of the Canadian Armed Forces Strategic Joint Staff. Today, I am here with Ty Curran, Deputy Director, General International Security Policy at the Department of National Defense, as well with my friends from Global Affairs. We are very honored to be here in front of you to provide an update on Operation Unifier and the situation in Ukraine. I will start by saying that the Canadian Armed Forces has a long history of providing military support in Ukraine. Following the Russian invasion in Crimea in 2014, Canada launched Operation Unifier in response to requests from Ukraine to help deter Russian aggression and to help Ukraine remain free, sovereign, secure, and stable. Through various iterations of Operation Unifier, the Canadian Armed Forces has provided the security forces of Ukraine with specialized military training to support their professionalization and assist them in aligning with NATO standards and principles. Since the inception of Unifier, the Canadian Armed Forces have trained over 38,000 members of the security forces of Ukraine.
Well, because the translators are trying to keep up with you. No.
For sure, it's my French coming out. Sorry about that. Alors, depuis le début de l'opération.
Since the beginning of the Unifier operation, the Canadian Armed Forces has trained over 38,000 members of the security forces of Ukraine in Ukraine and other countries. Since the start of the Russian invasion, Canada has contributed over $1.8 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. Canada's contribution include 39 armored combat support vehicles, 8 Leopard 2 main battle tanks, 1 armored recovery vehicle, a surface-to-air missile system, an M777 howitzer and associated ammunitions, 200 armored vehicles, winter clothing and equipment, small arms, demining equipment, high-resolution camera for drones, and satellite imagery.
Continue to provide the security forces of Ukraine with recruit training at Camp Lid in the UK, combat medic training, armored training, sapper training, technical training on the M777 howitzer, and leadership training. Over 4,600 members of the security forces of Ukraine have been trained through those initiatives since the spring of 2022. Through our Air Task Force in Prestwick in the UK, the RCAF flew over 450 air missions transporting over 12 million pounds of military donations from our allies and partners, a significant contribution to ensure a constant flow of supplies to the security forces of Ukraine. Also, at the request of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the Canadian Armed Forces have been bolstering Ukraine's cyber defense capabilities since early 2022. This support notably includes the provision of 24/7 cybersecurity expertise and of cyber threat intelligence. All these contributions and those of our allies and partners are coordinated through the Security Assistance Group Ukraine, or the SAGU, located in Wiesbaden, Germany. Canada plays a significant and integral role in this headquarters, namely with the provision of a Canadian team led by a Canadian general coordinating all the training for all allies. The support from Canada, from our allies, and from our international partners is critical to assist Ukraine in this very difficult and intense campaign. The ongoing Ukrainian counteroffensive continues to make tactical progress in the Zaporizhzhia region. Ukraine has demonstrated an impressive resolve over the last 572 days since the invasion started in 2022. There is no denying that Russia is feeling the effects of sustained combat operations. Russia is likely to conduct another partial military mobilization in the next 3 to 6 months with the intent of amassing enough troops to launch a renewed offensive in Ukraine. However, it is very likely that a newly mobilized troops will be ill-equipped and poorly trained. In its effort to fracture Ukraine's civilian and military resilience, Russia will continue to target Ukrainian grain storage and port infrastructure facilities with drones and missile strikes to prevent the export of Ukrainian agricultural products. Over the coming winter, Russia is also likely to resume its strike campaign against Ukrainian power grid, power grid, which greatly affects the Ukrainian population. Russia will continue to look at challenging Western allies in our collective commitment to Ukraine. This is why it's important that the defense team and the rest of NATO allies remain focused. I will end my remarks here, and I will look forward to answer your questions. With this, merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bazin.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bazin. Vous avez 6 minutes. Alors, merci à tous les témoins d'être ici. Alors, en tant que conservateur, bien sûr, on vous soutient à 100%. On soutient tout ce que vous faites en Ukraine.
Of military equipment happened under a previous conservative government. And it's something I'm very proud of. And I can tell you that as the official opposition, the Conservative Party has supported the government in every effort that it's made in supporting Ukraine in this brutal war against the Russian invaders. We will continue to do so. And in fact, we've actually asked the government to do more. One of those things that we've been asking for is to provide more armored vehicles to Ukraine. In my recent trip to Ukraine, Pat and I heard directly from both the Office of the President and the Ministry of Defense that they love the Leopard tanks. They love the Senators that we provided and would love to get more. But they also know that donations of things like LAVs and M113s, track LAVs have been well used in Ukraine, donated from other countries. We are in the process of decommissioning hundreds of older stock that are considered surplus and wore out. I know that Armatech in London has made a proposal to the Government of Canada to refit those vehicles and send them to Ukraine. They can do 8 a month. The Australians and the Americans have said that they would partner in on this if Canada would lead. They have surplus vehicles as well, which Armatech could re-armor, retool, and put in the fight. Where are we at as the Government of Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces in donating these surplus decommissioned vehicles to Armatech and ultimately to Ukraine?
I'll turn to Ty here, who's the expert for donations in the Department of National Defense.
Thank you. Chair, it's a pleasure to be here. Ty Curran, I'm the Deputy Director General for International Security Policy. Sort of the process by which we identify donations that we're providing to Ukraine is relatively straightforward. So at the heart of it is items that Ukraine has asked us for, and we get that through a number of different methods, particularly through the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which is meeting today in Ramstein, Germany, but as well as directly from the ambassador and Ukrainians that have reached out to us. I think we've worked very hard to ensure that we're meeting those priorities by sending armored vehicles, by sending tanks, by sending some of the other items that the general mentioned. We do have a $500 million funding envelope that's available in this fiscal year to help support Ukraine.
Has that been allocated, or is that still available to other donations?
So parts of it have been allocated. So you would have seen over the weekend the minister made an announcement about our support for an air defense partnership, and so some of that money came out of that allocation. But there are funds that remain in that space, and we continue to look at ways that we can support Ukraine.
So in previous tranches of money that has been earmarked for supporting Ukraine, there's the NASAMS air defense missile system that we are purchasing from the United States. Has that been delivered?
No, it has not.
When will the Ukrainians actually get that piece of kit, which we promised months ago?
So we're working with the United States who produced this piece of equipment, and we're hoping that that's going to be available soon, but there is a production timeline that goes along with that.
You guys are tracking that to make sure that it is delivered in real time as best as possible?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, part of the challenge has been the availability of systems of that nature, just the global availability of that type of equipment. And so we're working very hard to support that, given that air defense is the #1 priority for the Ukrainians.
On the Leopard 2 tanks that we've sent, how many are they all still in operation, or have any of them been destroyed in battle?
I'll take that one, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'll take that one, Mr. Chair here. So we had received reports in the past that maybe one tank had been destroyed. Now I'm getting more reporting that that's not the case. So we're still looking into, there's more than our Leopard 2 tanks in theater. Yep. So we're digging into that. We just got early reports this week that it might have not been one of our 8 tanks that had been destroyed. So
So under Operation Unifier, we sent over a number of our Canadian soldiers to help train Ukrainians on our Leopard 2s. That work is completed. Have those soldiers come home, or have they been retasked with other duties in Operation Unifier or under NATO while they're stationed in Europe?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So again, developing story here. Recently, in discussions with Poland, there was no demand signal for our training, our troops training on Leopard 2. But lately, a couple of weeks ago, we've been asked again to throw another course together. So we do have 24 members there conducting what we think is going to be maybe one of the last serial of Leopard 2 training. If there's more asked, we'll be ready to answer again.
I can tell you that when we were there as committee, it was a sombering experience to see our troops training Ukrainian recruits. You know, when I was last in Ukraine under Operation Unifier, and we, as committee, a number of years ago, went to Yavoriv, where we were training Ukrainians along with the Americans and the Brits. You know, we're training experienced soldiers. Now we're training green recruits. And I just wanted to say to all of our forces who are working in Operation Unifier, as well as all those that are working in NATO, including those that are serving in the brigade in Latvia at EFP, NATO, just outside at Ziza. I just want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for standing up for Ukraine. Thank you for standing against the Russian aggression that we're experiencing, not just in Ukraine, but right across the NATO eastern flank and our Arctic.
Thank you, Mr. Zan. I didn't hear, maybe I should have heard, an answer on Armatech.
Yes.
So we are tracking quite closely a number of different inputs from industry that have made recommendations about different proposals. Ultimately, that's a decision that we pass up to policymakers, and then we try and act. The challenge, of course, around any of the donations that come out of the third CAF inventory that's involved with that as well, is balancing out the operational requirements for the CAF, particularly as we do things like operations and flow forces into Latvia.
Mr. Fisher, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome back to all the members on the committee. It's been a few months. Major General, thank you for being here. Thank you for your team being here, and thank you for your service to our country. You only had a 5-minute opening, and I almost wish you'd had a 20 or 25 minutes so that you'd be able to really give us a feel of what's going on there. You talked about the Russians looking to remobilize again. It feels like it was just yesterday that they did that, and I can recall having this fear that it was going to be very, very significant, much like the start of the war when we thought, could be over very, very quickly. And then, of course, the resilience of the Ukrainians was something that the world took notice of. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just describe quickly what that next remobilization looks like for Russia. Is it 10,000 troops? Are they looking for 250,000 troops? Was it the last one considered successful, or was it considered a bit of a flop? Because as you'll recall, when we met a year ago, this war, this unjust war, was in the news every day. We saw it. It was top of mind for all of our allies, including Canada. And now we don't hear about it nearly as much. So maybe just a little bit of thought on the first remobilization by Russia. I think they entered into some conscriptions and things like that, and whether that was successful and what the new one might look like. And is that a regular thing? Is that something that's traditionally done? They're continuously remobilizing and putting a call out for more soldiers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A great question here. Two-part question. Did the first mobilization work? We don't think it did. We don't have the final numbers of how many. I mean, there's a lot of propaganda that will be out there of what Russia make us believe they were successful with. One thing is for sure is that Ukraine was able to hold back. Like you've mentioned, the resolve and the resilience in Ukraine is incredible. The first blow initially we didn't think was going to be, we thought Russia may have a chance at the time, and Ukraine has been really good at holding the initial offensive and also to holding the ground through that mobilization. Russia was not able to do much more, and then Russia's been able to hold that line, but they've not been able to take critical ground. You will have seen how long they've been around Bakhmut with not much gains there. So that's part of the first, your first part of the question about the initial mobilization. On this remobilization, we don't have any numbers, and I don't think Russia will publish any numbers because their first mobilization didn't work very well. So we don't have specific numbers. We can dig into that, but I don't think we have any. What we believe, though, is it's going to be more of the same. Ill-equipped, ill-trained, demoralized troop, probably not effective. But I think our role as the West is to make sure that we continue to provide Ukraine what they need to continue to hold off Russia as long as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Major General. The enthusiasm for on Canada's part has been unwavering. We've heard some things, you know, we heard 6, 8, 10 months ago that there might be a little bit less enthusiasm from the United States on one side of the political spectrum, but it seems to be that Biden is holding strong on that. What is the general enthusiasm for supporting Ukraine within our allies?
Maybe I can start with the first part of the question. Like my colleague Ty mentioned today, there's the UDCG happening in Ramstein where all the ministers of defense are gathered from the coalition to discuss that issue. The support is still there. The U.S. ourselves, we continue to look at what we can send. I think in that space, we've all looked within the allies into what was already ready in the inventory. We have to play a balance between the security situation, what we can provide to Ukraine, and what we have to keep as a coalition for ourselves. So there's a tough space there. The industry has answers to this, and how do we work with industry to mobilize in order to continue to feed over the long run to make sure that Ukraine sustains at least holding the ground, but at one point also continue to break through and regain some of that territory. Ty or Allison, did you want to add something?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Alison Grant, Director General for International Security from Global Affairs Canada. So I would love to pitch in on that question too, because it's my team at Global Affairs that organized for the NATO summit in Vilnius that just took place in July. And I can tell you that there was very widespread and strong support to ensure that parts of the communique were strong on Ukraine. Also that we approved several different types of support for Ukraine at the summit, institutional support, practical support in terms of launching a new comprehensive assistance program for Ukraine focusing on non-lethal assistance from all allies. It'll be pooled. That'll go to Ukraine, as well as political support with the establishment of a new NATO-Ukraine Council. So that all happened just, about a month and a half ago. And it was a great show, a strong show of support for Ukraine, rallying around as well good language on membership too. Thank you.
Dean, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. C'est toujours un plaisir de vous avoir. Merci pour votre disponibilité. C'est très important.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being available. My first question is what we can provide to Ukraine. There are some obligations to be maintained, but there is also material that we have to produce to send to Ukraine. That is an issue. There's a newspaper article that came out recently on supply problems associated with munitions. The blame was being cast on the industry, but what many noted is that Canada did not provide any solid contracts to the industry to ensure there would be ongoing production. Christiane Ferrani said, and she appeared before the committee, said you couldn't just take a press release or a Twitter post and take it to the bank to get funding. What you need are solid long-term contracts, guarantees for the industry so that they invest in the material and the labor needed. So this war has been going on for a year and a half now, and there are no contracts signed with industry. That would also improve things for communities in which the industries are located. Isn't this an issue, the fact that there are no contracts signed between the government and the industry for the long-term provision of military supplies and equipment, such as munitions?
I think the reality is that there is a significant there's a lot of munitions and equipment that's gone out the door that needs to be both replaced and provided to Ukraine, and so there is a requirement, I think, for industry to scale up to meet that demand. Similarly, we're seeing shortages internationally on shells and equipment that you mentioned. I think it's a fair point that government or that industry is looking for that sort of long-term signal about what it is that is required. And I think part of the challenge we've had over the last year is responding rapidly to Ukraine's needs, trying to find whatever was on the shelf in order to provide to meet their demands and do that in as short a timeline as possible. I think as the conflict continues to drag on, we need to get ourselves on a footing that is able to respond to that in the long term, thinking not just, we all hope the conflict ends soon, but thinking not just about sort of the continuation of the conflict, but as well about how we restock our own inventory afterwards. And I think industry has a significant role to play in that, and I think that's something we're going to need to look at to improve over the coming time. Over to you.
Oui, je vais peut-être ajouter quelques points ici.
There are some points I'd like to add at this point. There have been many conversations between defense and the industry, including the munitions industry in Quebec. All NATO countries and all countries involved in the conflict are having the same conversations with their industrial sectors to come up with solutions. There is a market. If we take the 155 artillery round, the U.S. has sent over 1 million of them. The industry might be seeking guarantees, but should see that there is a market. Canadian demand isn't really going to make a change and transform the industry for the future. All allies are having the same problem. There is an available market. War isn't a market we want to promote, but there should be some risks taken on both sides. In the same vein, we heard the former Minister of Defense saying that 15 billion had to be cut from various departments. Might this be a problem for defense when it comes to providing supplies to Ukraine? How do you see it?
A significant portion of the federal budget has a role to play in any attempt to reallocate the budget. So there's a certain responsibility I think that defense is going to have to play in that space, but I don't think that diminishes the priority that we're putting on Ukraine and the need to ensure that we're meeting the demands that they have.
Peut-être sur un...
Perhaps on something that is more within the aegis of global affairs. There is an embargo by a number of countries on agricultural products from Ukraine. I won't name the countries, but with the WTO, could this give an impression that unity among allies is in fact weakening?
Mr. Chair, to respond on that point, it certainly has been somewhat surprising to see that several EU member states have chosen to put this embargo on Ukrainian grain. This is, of course, a trade issue between those individual states and Ukraine. It is. We are aware that the European Union was making best efforts to be able to negotiate around this particular challenge, but it will
we are also aware at the same time that those very same states are very supportive of Ukraine in many other ways and will continue to provide other types of support. So we see this really as a very straightforward trade-related issue. Thank you.
Madison, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much for appearing before us today and in person. That's great. I wanted to ask, General Primo, you had discussed the focus for the Ukraines, of course, on air defense and that partnership. One of the key commitments that we had made as well was in terms of training and dollars. Now, of course, we don't have the F-16s. That's what they're looking for. However, we do have a number of international schools. There is one that's really incredible and that wants to help and participate in the training of Ukrainian potential pilots on that F-16 platform. And so I was wondering if you could talk about that and how we're moving forward in terms of the allocation of those training dollars and specifically how it relates to air defense training. Or
Although I wear the blue uniform, Ty is actually the expert on that piece.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
So F-16s have been a high priority for the government of Ukraine, and it's something we were very excited that we were able to join the international coalition. We've been working very closely with the Dutch and the Danes who are leading this initiative, trying to figure out how we can support the various phases that are out there for training. And so that includes things like language training so that the Ukrainian pilots can be up to speed on the machines. That includes things like learning how to fly fighter jets in general, and then as well training that's specific to F-16s. Obviously, from a D&D CAF point of view, as you mentioned, we don't have F-16s, but there is areas that we can contribute as part of that. It's been a big, it's been a challenging file, I think, from the point of view that F-16s are a very complicated piece of equipment, and bringing that in. So we're working closely with international partners to see how we can fit in, and that's one of the areas that we've allocated some funding to support.
So those potential funds for that training for a school like the one that exists in my riding could still be open and is still a possibility for that help to Ukraine as part of the commitment that the government made?
Yeah, part of it it depends on. So as I say, we're working with international partners in this space. So what we're trying to find is a place where we can bring sort of unique Canadian capabilities to meet the Ukrainian demands. And so in that case, we're trying to look at spaces where. Perhaps it's areas where allies haven't already put forward a donation or an offer to the Ukrainians, but we are certainly still looking at all of the options.
Okay. So obviously, a number of 59 million actually worth of weapons was announced by the Prime Minister. That would be of ammunition that would be sourced from Canadian companies to donate to Ukraine. Can you confirm whether the production of the equipment occurred within Canada? It was questioned in a news story previously of where the sourcing of that ammunition was coming from.
So I would have for the 59 million. Would you be referring to the Colt Canada contract that
yes.
Yeah. So we've purchased a number of weapons, small arms, and ammo from Colt Canada, as well as I believe Prairie Gunworks. In the case of Prairie Gunworks, I know that the equipment was produced in Canada, or I'm pretty sure, but I don't know the answer off the top of my head for Colt Canada, and I can certainly get back to you on that.
That would be great, because it was also hinted that ultimately the government of the ministry or the Department of Defense wanted to actually not make that information public. So to make that information public would be really helpful, considering a lot of our industry partners, as Madame Normandin has stated, are looking to ensure that they can solidify those contracts. So is in terms of your general overall knowledge here at this table, you can assure us right now that all of that information will be kept public, and there won't be certain things that are held back in terms of like with non-disclosure statements or.
To the best of so my assumption. Sorry, let me just start by saying if there is a contractual agreement that we've signed in that space, we would obviously have to respect that, but. From my point of view, I'm happy to get back to you with the answer to that question. And we have a very strong relationship with Colt Canada. I just don't happen to know where all of their production is done, and I wouldn't want to give you the wrong answer right now on that front.
Appreciate it. 1 minute. Okay. I think I won't fit it in, so I'll give it back and I'll come back to you. Yes, always.
Yes, well, sometimes your expectations are unrealized. Mr. Kelly, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. And I'd like to begin just by echoing the remarks of Mr. Bazan and affirm just how strongly we in the opposition support the work of the government in its support of Ukraine, and remind anybody that had forgotten that the previous government was there in 2014 and launched Operation Unifier, and so we continue to stand with Ukraine and call on the government to do more and do better to support Ukraine. I'd like a quick response, if I could, on the question that came out of your remarks, General Prevost. What landmine clearance equipment have we sent, or are we sending? You mentioned it in your opening statement.
Yes. Mr. Chair, so some of the equipment we sent from the CAF, from the Canadian Armed Forces, is tactical equipment that soldiers would use to demine for their operations rather than demining writ large for a country, which normally comes back more into the global affairs lane as a remediation to the conflict. But we sent metal detectors, tactical equipment for the security forces of Ukraine to be able to demine for their own operations.
Okay. All right. Now, we've been told about the depth of mine defense. In some cases, minefields 18 kilometers deep. I mean, you're not going to clear that with handheld detection devices. In order to clear a minefield that deep, we were told repeatedly it's all about artillery capability and being able to push back so that you won't have the immediate targeted response once you detonate a mine in the clearing process. So back to the issue of shells. When has there been an increase in Canadian production in the last year over year?
I wouldn't have, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't have that question, the answer to the question. We'd have to check with the company. I know our Deputy Minister Material, Associate Deputy Minister Material is dealing with the company. Have they increased their production? Will they increase their production?
Okay, which company are you referring to?
JDOTS.
Okay. And is this at the facility located north of Montreal?
Correct.
Okay. So it's still not operating and not...
I wouldn't be able to answer that question, but we can come back with the answer to this question.
I think it's been a year since this was identified as an area where Canadian production could be employed. Is there a sense of urgency in getting this factory up and running?
Yeah, so that's the point I was making just earlier here. I think there's a point where we have to negotiate with industry, but Canadian demands alone won't be enough maybe to satisfy that industry. So, but that industry needs to recognize that there's a global market for this here, and we're dealing with that issue right now.
But to meet global markets, they will require export certification from Global Affairs. Is that going to be expeditiously? Will they be able to do that immediately? What steps has Global Affairs taken to ensure that the companies have the assurance that they can, in fact, export any surplus that the Canadian forces wouldn't take?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the question, I'm not in charge of export controls, but I do know my team's involved in the process at Global Affairs that we have developed a special and fast process for clearing exports to Ukraine in terms of military exports. And we work alongside D&D on it. So I'm aware of a special procedure for that, but I unfortunately don't have all the details, not in charge of it. I can get back to you.
Okay, I would appreciate if you did, if there's anything you could table with the committee. I mean, we heard repeatedly in the various bases that the committee visited in the summer, and as well as James and I when we were in Ukraine, that we heard the 155 shells are, I mean, they are perhaps the hottest military commodity for our allied forces that use that caliber of weapon, and getting them built is critical to the entire defense. We heard that repeatedly, that artillery capability is what holds back the ability to clear minefields and to actually advance into Russian positions that are extraordinarily well defended at this point.
20 seconds.
All right, I'll give you the last 20 seconds if you have a response.
That's good. So what I think, Mr. Chair, so we'll provide what update we can provide from the discussion between our department and the other allies as well involved in that conversation and the company.
We do seem to be accumulating a lot of undertakings to respond at a later date, so somehow or another we'll have to organize that. Madame Lapandropoulos, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess we need to practice the last name again a few more times.
Yeah, I know. I just
It
realized
was too long a break.
Well, it's 3 months of not saying your name.
Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here to answer our questions today. And I guess my first question brings us back a few months. At our last meetings before we rose, we had heard a lot about the Ukrainian offensive that was going to take place in the spring, summer, and I'm wondering if you can tell us in which ways Ukraine gained anything from that offensive, if anything. If you could just give us a bit of a resume before I move on to my next question.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question there. We did discuss, we were expecting that counteroffensive to occur, which started this summer. There's been, I would say, tactical gains, not a huge shift in gains. It's the nature of that conflict. This is a conflict that is very based on, I would say, old tactics of trench lines and artillery being shelled one way or the other. Russia had made quite some gains in southern Ukraine, and it's heavily defended. But Ukrainians are making tactical moves, but there's been no sweeping breakthrough this time. But this work has to continue.
We had also heard a lot about how Russia has immense potential because of its resources and also vast land and population in order to maintain the potential weapon production a lot more than obviously Ukraine. Ukraine relies a lot on the West in order to make sure that they are able to fight back. And today you've told us a lot about what weapons we've sent over and generally what is needed. I'm wondering if you can give us a bit more info on how we're working with our allies and what specifically our allies can be doing to better support in the long run, considering this might not be only one more offensive that happens now by Russia. Obviously, we seem to think that the war will continue for a long time. What strategies have been put in place and what kinds of discussions are happening with NATO allies, and what role does Canada play in all of that?
Okay, so maybe I'll start, Mr. Chair, and then allow Ty or even my colleagues here to reinforce if possible. It's important to know that throughout the conflict, the nature of the donations, if you have not noticed, has changed because of the nature of the conflict. I mean, we've talked a lot about artillery, initially artillery rounds, because it was the nature of the conflict this time. This continues. So there's going to be those needs that persist until there's really a breakthrough on the Ukrainian side. But there's also been a change in the nature of the conflict, and when Russia started attacking by air, indiscriminate attacks against the population, nodes and everything else, then air defense became important. And you've seen after the tank discussion became because of the counteroffensive. We basically mounted as a coalition brigades of Ukrainians to be able to push that counteroffensive. So that strategy is always being updated, mainly in Wiesbaden, but in Constitution, actually, it's a Ukrainian plan that we helped them with. So those things will change, which is also complicating matters with industry of guaranteeing long-term what's going to be the next bound. Now, what also is complicating this piece is a lot of what they'll need in the future requires technology, high technology. When we talk air defense system, we're talking things that need long-term lead items that are complicated to build, that don't get delivered quickly. But that is why we do have those tables that are weekly, monthly, to discuss the strategy long-term in order to do what we can with industry to match or even exceed what Russia can produce on the other side. I think there's clearly a technical advantage in the West so we can win that fight compared to Russia. Ty?
Mr. Speaker, maybe I'll just add, the question of coordination is something that we're quite focused on. And I mentioned already the Minister of Defense was at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in Ramstein, Germany today. That's with a number of NATO and like-minded partners all working together to try to figure out how we can support Ukraine's priorities. And so I think we've seen some of the coalitions that have stood up. We talked a bit about the F-16 coalition earlier, but the air defense one that we recently joined, tanks, that kind of thing. So I think trying to figure out how we, as partners, can best kind of bring the resources we have to bear to meet the Ukrainian demands is something that we're working on always with our partners. And the enthusiasm across the board still is very high. It's something we're concerned about in the sense of if that were to waver, that could be a challenge. But I think as collective supporters of Ukraine, that enthusiasm continues to be high.
Do I have a minute, Mr. Chair, just to answer? Because more on the political side, I would say there's been a lot of energy put into this question of how we demonstrated the political commitment to support Ukraine over the long term. And you will have seen at the Vilnius summit of NATO in July that G7 leaders signed a joint declaration of support for Ukraine. We now have over 20 countries that have signed on to this declaration. Canada played a central role in producing that declaration and getting support for it. And at its heart is a commitment to provide multi-year, long-term security assurances and commitments to Ukraine, primarily in the military and security sphere, but also for reconstruction and recovery in the event of, ongoing Russian aggression, but also in future for repeated attempts of Russian aggression. So the point of that is to ensure that allies and partners are able to reassure Ukraine over the long term that we are there for as long as it takes, and also to signal to Putin that he will have to face a coordinated campaign of Western support for Ukraine over the long term.
2.5 minutes, Madame Normandine.
Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais vous amener sur la question des drones.
I want to talk about the issue of drones. We know that Canada is supplying software and cameras, but we think that there are issues. We can think about Elon Musk with Starlink prevented the drone attack. We know that China has also developed a technology which can prevent Ukrainian drones to function. So do you have any comments on this? And is there a risk for the future to see that the technology of drones, which was very useful at the beginning, it could become completely useless because there are weaknesses? Is this something that is being monitored presently? So, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the question. Of course, we follow up on this, not just Canada, in our coalition. That is something that's discussed everywhere, on the information side, but also on the planning side. Of course, this is the nature of war. War starts in a way, and then it evolves. And the Ukrainians are doing the same thing. Ukraine is adapting to the technology. Every time they receive new technology from various countries, they change their operation, and they use technology that they hadn't even used or been trained on before the war. So we follow everything that you mentioned, and we want to make sure that we can counter this or we can stay ahead of this. That's it. Do you want to take it?
Thank you. One question that you may not be able to answer now, but I'll keep it from the second round. We know that 6 deputy ministers were let go after the new Ukrainian Minister of Defense was appointed. Could we have an update? What kind of message does this send? We know that there are issues. Could we have global affairs analysis, please? You have only 30 seconds, but we might continue at the next round.
On to that, yes, it is true that 6 deputy ministers and the Secretary of State of Defense were recently asked to resign. This is apparently a standard practice when the minister has resigned from a post. So this should not be considered as a sign that any of those deputy ministers were involved in corrupt activities.
In 2.5 minutes plus 1.
Sometimes. Well, actually, in to sort of continue on, I mean, it certainly provides that lack of consistency, I guess, in terms of personnel on that other side certainly does prove problematic. So could you talk about how our officials and how all those communications, how we're on our side of it, how we're handling that, or if there's additional changes that we have to be in consideration of in order to maintain it, the relationships?
I think, Mr. Chair, it's still very early days. And I think it will be a question of rebuilding relationships with the deputy ministers through our ambassador and defense attaché at the Canadian Embassy in Kyiv. So it will take a bit of time.
Maybe just to pile onto that, we're fortunate, I think, that we have a very strong relationship with the Ukrainian government. Our previous minister and the previous minister of defense in Ukraine had a very strong relationship. We look forward, I think, to getting the opportunity to create that relationship with Minister Blair and the new minister. But similarly, it goes beyond that into the sort of bureaucratic level as well, too. And we're very fortunate, I think, that Canada's seen as a reliable partner in that space, and the Ukrainians have been very engaging with us from that point of view. But you're right. Anytime there's a change like that, there are some relationships that need to be rebuilt. And so I think that's something that we need to work on in coordination with our colleagues at the embassy in Kyiv.
One of the things that happened during our trip this summer, of course, was the massive meeting of the BRIC nations and the expansion. Could you talk about how, this is more of a GAC question, I guess, but how we are responding to that differently, how that potentially changes things, or if it's still along the same points? Just could you expand on what that meeting has meant in terms of discussions internally?
So the addition of new countries to the BRICS certainly will have long-term implications that we will be following closely. At this point, it's still, again, a little bit early to be saying what those implications might be, but I think it is fair to say that the BRICS may be seeking to align themselves as an opposing force to Western countries, and if that is indeed the case, then it's something that we will have to watch closely and respond appropriately.
Nice. Okay. Earlier in the year, of course, the CDS made that huge announcement about reconstitution orders and the impact. My colleague, Madame Narmeden, has spoken about budget cuts in terms of limiting capability. But could you talk about increasing stresses, I guess, on Canadian Armed Forces in terms of the lack of numbers for men and women that are active, and what we're doing to ensure that continued support of our own people, but in relation to Ukraine and what we're doing for them?
Okay, real quick. So reconstitution is still a priority in the Canadian Armed Forces. It's the top priority, along with culture. We need to refill the ranks. We're still missing the troops. Last time we talked, there's kind of been no change in terms of the amount of recruits that we have. The ones that are implicated in the fight to train Ukrainians, I'll say, are very motivated. Yes. It is great work that we're doing in all the countries we're involved in training. Like I mentioned, the 4,600 Ukrainian troops that we've trained. One thing that our soldiers notice over there, and you've seen it on the trip, is we have very young soldiers contributing over there to train. And they appreciate training soldiers that are focused, because they know those soldiers are leaving for the battle. So it's very motivating, and we hope we're going to be able to continue to do the same, because it's a great recruiting, I think, tool for us. Same with the brigade that we look forward to mounting in Latvia. These are good news stories for us, but recruiting Canadian soldiers in the CAF continues to be a challenge that we're focused on. Thank you.
We're on the trip that... and the people that we spoke to were very motivated. The corporals were doing sergeants' work, and sergeants were doing lieutenants' work, and lieutenants were doing majors' work. They were quite excited about the work that they were doing. So I hope that works as in favor of recruitment for Ms. Cramp-Nyman.
Thank you for being here. Question: Retired Brigadier General Gaston Côté said that, quote, extremely important lessons are emerging from all of this and from everything happening in Ukraine. However, these lessons are being ignored in some of the defense policy programs. In your opinion, what learned lessons from Ukraine do we need to be implementing now? So it's a question from 30,000 feet, but if you could give me a snapshot in 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, I would say one that's top of mind, which came up a few times today, is you go to war with what you have. So that is one lesson here. Ukraine had to look to allies to help out from the get-go, and we were right there responding to this. That's one. We're looking at more operational level lessons as well. I think one good one is that Ukrainian, through the training we've done over the years before the invasion, the second invasion in 2022, we had built a way of command and control and training that was more Western-like than Soviet-like, and that seems to have worked in favor of Ukraine so far. So we're looking at those lessons from a tactical perspective, operational perspective, and strategic perspective as well. So this is ongoing right now.
Andrew Leslie told our committee in June that, quote, with NATO, we were supposed to send a battle group on short notice so there could be cause to do so, which there is, by the way. Let's not forget what Russia is doing, those atrocities in Ukraine. It took us months to send a couple of 100. We're supposed to send a brigade and command it, but it still hasn't left. So my question is, we seem to be responding rapidly, or responding rapidly seems to be the intent, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So how has the CAF recruitment and retention crisis limited our ability to assist Ukraine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. To be frank, I think our recruiting challenges, the reconstitution, has not affected the way we responded to Ukraine. We've responded to the request of Ukraine in terms of training, in terms of sapper, howitzers, all the ones that I've listed before. So we were able to respond there. Your question also had to do with how we're going to plan to mount a brigade in Latvia. So in this one, we came up with a plan fairly quickly. This was a quickly developing story between the Baltic nations first, and then there was an announcement by NATO that there's going to be more battle groups along the border, notably in Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Romania as well. So we responded quickly with our plan. We made a plan quickly. In this case, we're implementing that plan. One of the challenges we have is that we're working with Latvia very hard to get the infrastructure ready. Latvia is not right now ready to receive a brigade, a multinational brigade of that size in terms of infrastructure. So we're working with them to be ready. Our plan matches the NATO regional plans, matches the plans that we have with the sister countries there, with Lithuania and Estonia, but also the other brigades. So I think we're on par with the plan we've put forward. We're discussing with our allies to man that brigade, and it's going well. One of the pieces, like I mentioned, is infrastructure, not only to house our troops in Latvia, because we're talking 2,200 Canadians now being deployed in Latvia over the next couple of years. We need to house them, but there's also training ranges and a whole bunch of infrastructure that needs to be worked with Latvia in order to make this happen. But we're on track.
Next question. Could you provide us with an update on Canadian Leopard 2s that were sent over to Ukraine, and are they currently available for use by the Ukrainian forces in theater? And how many units are still operational?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll answer that one here. We sent 8 tanks to Ukraine. They are involved in a battle right now in Zaporizhia region. So we have confirmation of that. Like we mentioned, we had a report over the last few weeks that one of them may have been destroyed. I'm getting new reports now that it might have been not one of ours, so we're just clarifying the issue. It seems like it was not one of ours, which means the 8 tanks that we have are still in the fight.
During the last session, we heard from a number of different delegations with regards to regional powers, including Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, and they were all unanimous in their call for Canadian government to increase our spending of 2% of GDP. Finland and Japan have also indicated that they have a plan to hit 2%, and unfortunately, our government has made it unclear that they do not intend to meet this bare minimum. How has this affected relations with NATO allies that are currently dealing with these very real Russian threats? And how has it affected our ability to deliver the aid that Ukraine needs in a timely and effective manner?
You might consider that question to be a political question, to defer to your political masters, but you are all sophisticated witnesses, so I'll let the question stand.
Thank you. So, I didn't catch it.
I just might
Want a free
add,
commentary too.
Mr. Speaker, I might add, we deal regularly with our allies, particularly the ones that you just listed. I think we've had the opportunity to make some fairly significant contributions in that area. As you know, we have forces that are in Poland that are doing training. We have the stand up to the brigade in Latvia. And so I think partners are very happy with the work that we're doing. However, they would always like us to do more. And I think that's something that we continue to look at.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. I'm in Mr. Souza for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for attending. And, Canada being the sixth largest GDP country in NATO is also the sixth largest contributor to NATO. So Canada is doing its part in that regard, and certainly we can always do better. But I was taken by the tremendous amount of reception, gratitude that we receive in Estonia and Latvia, even in Poland, and recognizing that Canada has been a leading force and has contributed tremendously to the cause. And I was really taken by watching some of the Ukrainian recruits being trained by Canadians, not to fight necessarily, but to defend themselves in mining, the mines, and what do they call dragon's teeth, all that stuff that creates in those trench warfares. And I was taken by the colonels basically advising their soldiers not to get too friendly with the Ukrainian recruits. Be calm, do the job, avoid friendships, don't do Instagrams or Facebook or social media, never knowing if these guys come back. And that's a sad reality of this fight. These young kids are putting their lives, they're brave, they're going out, they're doing the job, and Canadians are there to try to provide support where necessary. So I'm very proud of our team and what they're doing out there. So thank you for what you're doing. And but when I was there and I saw all of us, saw the tremendous amount of collaboration, support with Operation Unifier, with the other countries and states, I was also taken by the need for us to be responsive to Article 5, should it exist, either in the Baltic states, and hence the tremendous amount of support that we have in the Eastern Front. So the obvious question is, how much support is there, and how long will that area be secure given the amount of ammo that's available to us? Like, I'm getting conflicting reports as to how much we can withstand a defense measure there. Do you have a sense?
Mr. Chair, I'll take a first stab, and then we'll see if Alison or Ty or even Kathy have something to add. In the context the member is speaking, I think here it would be a very different conflict than what we see in Ukraine. I don't think the 155s would matter at that point. The technological might of NATO, if you think of the fighters, which is what we're trying to get to Ukraine, these are game changers. So I think we can't really compare. We're concerned. I think this is why all allies right now are trying to play the balance of what we can provide that's already ready available, while the industry is helping in some of the contracts we want to lay. But I think if Putin would cross the line there, the battle would change.
It would be a complete. Sorry, go ahead. No. I would assume it would be a huge response by NATO and by the rest Western countries involved. And I also appreciate the tremendous amount of display that we have there causes a deterrent. It's causing a deterrent to Russia for not doing anything further beyond where they're at in the Ukraine. I do worry about the Belarus, though, and that surrounding areas in terms of insurrections. So one question I always had, I still don't know it, how many civilian casualties have occurred, and how many soldiers are both Russia and Ukraine? Do you have I'm getting conflicting reports. How many people are actually being injured, or how many people are dying? Do you have a sense to date?
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the question. Our Ukrainian partners have resisted efforts about providing numbers. So we don't have an official source that says how many Ukrainian civilians have been killed or wounded, similar with their forces. There There is online reporting, that talks about that, but officially from that point of view, it's not something that the Ukrainian government has provided, and I'll defer to my colleagues at GAC if they want to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that's correct. I agree with Ty on that answer. I would simply add on the deterrent factor on the eastern flank. I'm going to mention the NATO summit in Vilnius again. It's like the third time I have, but I want, just because there was an incredible focus there on defense and deterrence planning and a very significant agreement on NATO's regional plans along the eastern flank. You've seen an increase in the number of battle groups that are stationed along the eastern flank. It's now no longer just the Baltics, but you have 4 new ones in southeastern Europe as well, Romania, Bulgaria, et cetera, as well as, of course, a surge in the battle group sizes in the Baltics. So a real focus there.
No, I have one more.
You're going to have to come back Thursday then. Yeah.
He's so mean.
Yeah. Only one more. Madame Normandine, 2.5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know that a long war is likely to Russia's advantage because it has more ability to send in fresh troops and to get them from other countries if necessary. But there is another long-term issue that might advantage Russia. Could there be an election to our neighboring country in the U.S., in other words, and could Trump be elected? That would be very discouraging.
I think that's probably a question we would want to leave to our political colleagues to respond on that.
Merci. Alors, un autre.
One thing we hear is that at the beginning of the conflict, Ukraine provided less information to allies. Over time, there has been more openness so that there is now more feedback on the training we provide to recruits. Is that continuing? Is there increasing information sharing from Ukraine?
Oui, alors je peux peut-être commencer, Monsieur le Président.
I may perhaps start, Mr. Chairman. Even before the invasion, a great deal of information was exchanged with Ukraine. Canada works through our embassies, our defense attaché, and through mechanisms such as the one in Wiesbaden. There is information exchange. We've mentioned cybersecurity. And yes, feedback on training for troops. Our soldiers see this every day. Our young women and men see it. We hear stories every week about the number of lives we save. So we do have direct feedback from troops providing training and from staff. Decisions on battle decisions are made by Ukraine with support from perhaps Wiesbaden and with support from the equipment we sent. But the information flow was well established even before the invasion.
As incredible as it may seem, I screwed up. I should have gone to Ms. Gallant for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with respect to NATO, we see our allies increasing their military effectiveness. For example, in Poland, they're doubling their armed forces to 300,000. What lessons can we learn from our NATO allies that they're taking that we should be implementing over here?
I'll start and I'll see if Ty or Alison want to continue here. NATO is an alliance, and obviously Poland is right on the border of Russia. I think together we've worked very well since even before the invasion started, as we had seen some signs of it, to relook at our plans, how we were going to work as a coalition. Before the invasion started, we had 3 battle groups. The EFPs that we were leading in Latvia and along have now grown to 8 EFPs along the border.
Mr. Chairman, you're okay. So you're talking about the battlefield. I'm talking about Canada. What should we be doing that our allies are doing? What we should be doing in Canada to meet the expectations wherein the minimum of 2% now has become the floor instead of the aspirational goal?
I think, Mr. Chair, the lesson that I think that we've learned from this is that there's an important element for us to be prepared for whatever's coming next. And I think when we look at defense spending, an opportunity to make sure that Canada can continue to contribute along the way that it has is important. And looking at ways that we can grow the work that we're doing with NATO is also important. I think we've made some valuable contributions over the last years. We've already referenced sort of our percentage.
Okay, so there are no specific lessons learned that you can report to this committee right now, observations that we can emulate.
I have, Mr. Chair, maybe perhaps one very important lesson. One of the things that I think this conflict has shown us is the importance of sort of logistics and mobility. We probably fell out of practice, perhaps, of moving large bits of equipment both across the ocean and as well internally in the European theater, and we've worked very closely with the European Union as well to ensure things like bridges and railheads and that sort of thing are available to transport. And I think it's been a practical element, in addition to a number of other things. That's been a very practical element of the conflict that it's forced us to relook at that. And I think we will be better prepared for the next conflict because of that.
Okay, and thank you very much for our foreign affairs officials. Purportedly, the Wagner Group has dissipated in Russia. How does this development impact the effectiveness of the Russian military in the Ukraine conflict?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer that question. Hard to know exactly, but the Wagner organization was used by the Russian army in Ukraine, but not to a very large extent. From our understanding, they were used in the Bakhmut area in particular to launch the offensive there, but then pulled out. So we do not, this is broadly speaking, expect that developments with the Wagner Group will have a significant effect on the Russian effort. That answers directly that question. If there were others in Wagner, I'm happy to also answer those.
Okay, and while everyone is saying we need to increase financing to the military, in the news recently there's been an announcement of cuts forthcoming to the military. So how are we going to increase our spending allocation to a minimum of 2% if we're already cutting back funding the military?
So as mentioned, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the question. As we look at the fiscal reallocation, defense is a big portion of the federal budget, and as a result, we need to play a role in that. I think we're also looking at the same time, the defense policy update, and looking for that to come to fruition, in the near future. And so I think we have a fiscal reality that the government has asked us to look at. The defense needs to play a role. But similarly, the government has also noted the requirement for an update to our defense policy, and we're continuing to work on that.
So quite apart from our area of operations where our troops are there are the surrounding countries almost adjacent to Ukraine, very close is Romania, for example. Are we doing anything for those countries to help augment their defenses against this impending force?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question there. So in Romania, a battle group will be stood up as well, like it was in it's one of the 4 countries, I believe, that will have a battle group like we were mounting, or a brigade, like we're mounting now in Latvia.
And Canadian contribution?
No Canadian contribution to that. Again, NATO is an alliance, so right now we're going through 4th generation conferences to figure out which allies will be assigned to which battle groups. We have our partners. Romania will have their partners as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gallant. Madame Lalonde, bienvenue au comité. 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my first time at this committee as parliamentary secretary, and I'd like to begin by thanking the women and the men who serve in Canada and around the world.
To everyone in our military for their great service. And last Friday actually was our Military Family Day. And you know, these are the unsung heroes of our CAF members. So I just want to start by saying thank you for all your services. Major General Prévost, you did mention there was change in the nature of the conflict. So as we are looking over the past few months, we've seen Ukraine utilizing drone to strike targets within Russia. What do you see as a driving this change in tactics, and what are the potential upside and risk that these kinds of attacks from a Ukrainian perspective?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, the member, for the question. So one of the reasons on the changes of this is Ukraine is obviously trying to impede Russia's ability to continue to sustain that conflict, much like Russia's trying to do it in Ukraine by attacking lines of communication where the military aid is actually transiting through. Ukraine is trying to do that. We call that the deep battle, trying to stop the reinforcements from Russia to move into the Ukraine. So this is the reason it's moved in that space now. We're obviously watching this carefully. There's always risk of lateral escalation with these actions, but Ukraine is at that point now that they have to stop Russia from their actions further down than just along the front line like we started initially.
Thank you very much. And I'll just say, you know, we have to also thank the Ukrainian army and for their efforts in this war. In terms of Operation Unifier, how has the nature of their Ukraine needs changed, and what is the type of training that are more currently in demands, and what does this tell us about the state of the conflict, if I may ask, Major General?
Mr. Chair, very, very good question. So just like the conflict has changed, the nature of the training has changed as well on our side. Obviously, our Canadian, one of the biggest contribution initially was the training for the recruits in the UK, up Interflex, which I think you visited. And then as Canada started to contribute specific capabilities like the howitzer, for instance, we started training the troops on the equipment that we've donated. So this is how it's changed. Some of the things will probably continue, like the medical med techs or medic training that we're doing. One thing that I'll mention, though, is we tend to train the trainer. When we start in a space, we train initially the soldier. That's how Unifier had grown throughout the time. We've moved along the way to train the trainer as well. And the good news about this is that now Ukraine themselves have exceeded the coalition's capacity to train their own recruits. So there's more recruits being trained in Ukraine right now by Ukrainians than there are between the coalition members altogether. So this is, I think, what Canada does best, is to train young folks, but also train the trainer.
Thank you. And this is actually very nice news. And maybe I'm just going to ask, if I have a little bit more time, Mr. Chair, how is Canada, and I think you somewhat answered, but I'm just going to ask more specifically, Canada is leveraging the expertise of our CAF member, of our Canadian Armed Forces, to best assist the training of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And I think you'll say, but I will let you finish this sentence.
Yes, thank you again for the question. You know, I've talked already about training the trainer, a space as well where we're moving into, which I think you've noticed in Latvia potentially is where there's places also where we start training more leadership. We're starting to train more collective training rather than just recruits. So we're kind of going up the value chain. As Ukrainians are picking up their own needs at the lower levels, we're starting to go up the value chain in terms of the training we dispense. Now, my colleague from Global Affairs talked about security assurances over the long term. This will also change probably the nature of our longer-term contribution. We are looking at that for the future, but right now we're still in the same, what you've seen is what we provide. It's just evolving a bit into the value chain of the training that we provide. Thank you.
Ms. Matheson and Mr. Bazan, 5 minutes, unless my Liberal colleagues have any wild objection, I'll take the final 5. That's all right? Okay, thank you.
Building off of, I think, a number of questions, certainly Mr. Sousa's question or commentary, we did see remarkable things from our own Canadian troops and the training of those Ukrainians, and it was quite moving. And the emotional impact that has, of course, on those troops. I was wondering if you could talk about, in combination of a few things, I mean, the supports that we're providing to our own troops in terms of the emotional, mental health stresses that they're dealing with because of that. In addition, we had talked earlier about a bit of, while they are incredibly motivated and excited to do this work and so proud to do this work, it takes a toll in terms of that reconstitution order and numbers. And then also how that's impacting our folks within D&D centrally here. So all in combination in terms of a lot of that stress and how we're dealing with that in terms of mental health programs specifically in this, but also for folks at home.
Okay, I'll start, and then I'll turn to maybe Global Affairs to talk about mental health, if they wish. It's the first time I hear about it in this form, and there's lots going on in the mental health portion. But in terms of our own troops, this is something we've learned over the years. Resilience ahead of a deployment. During a deployment, we've heard some of the comments here also. In the initial part of the conflict, when it started, some of our troops that had trained Ukrainians started to try to get in contact with the soldiers over there, and some of them were not answering. So we have to be educating our troops about that, but there's the mental health portion that we monitor ahead of a deployment, during a deployment, and when they come back towards their families as well. It's a constant conversation about the mental resilience of our troops there. In terms of the mental health and health in general, for Ukrainians. I know that's not necessarily the nature of the question, but I want to see if Kathy's got something to say here.
Sure. Just to add on that, certainly it doesn't cover our Canadian troops, but we have been also providing mental health support to our locally employed staff at the embassy in Kyiv who have been going through their own traumas. And I know it doesn't answer your question directly, but we are providing direct support to Ukraine for the mental health of Ukrainians. So in various ways, including women and girls who've been affected by sexual and gender-based violence.
I mean, if I could just add, if there's more that you can add to that as part of this report to report back, that would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just I want to follow up on some of the comments I've made and I guess challenge General Prévost a bit on Latvia and them being prepared to accept their troops. You know, from when this committee was over in Latvia in 2017 to visiting the Camp Adsi this time around, the amount of infrastructure that has been built up there to support Canada and our allies is amazing. Latvia has been a very gracious and charitable host. They love the Canadians and the job that we're doing there. And to suggest that, you know, we aren't going to go up to the brigade level until the infrastructure is there, I think is a bit of a cop-out. When you look at, you know, when we first went there, we were all intense and happy to be there. And, you know, we witnessed that they're leveling ground quick to put more barracks up. But in the interim, if we need to put our guys in tents, I know that they'll be happy to stay out there. I know as cold as and ugly as it is during the wintertime, but there's a job to be done and a border to be protected, and the eastern flank is at risk. When we were visiting our American colleagues in Poland, they're still working after several years. They're still working out of temporary facilities. You know, where the Latvians built the nicest fitness center I've ever seen on a military base in my life. It's gorgeous. So I think, you know, I want to thank the Latvians for being such great hosts to Canada, and that we'll continue to do what needs to be done and get there quicker than later. The other thing is, you know, it was touched on about our defense expenditures. And in the CAN4Gen, there was a memo that came out from on September 6th from Deputy Minister Bill Matthews and CDS General Eyre. And in it, it says, as one of the largest federal departments, national defense has an important role to play in effective and efficient government operations. Early efforts are now underway across the defense team to address our part in this initiative by developing spending reduction options. So my question is this reductions going to impact our ability to support Ukraine, to support our allies in NATO, and of course continue to recruit and retain our forces so that we can take care of things at home here as required?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll answer actually, for sure, the first part, a bit of the second part, and we'll see if Ty has something else to add. So on the infrastructure, our Army, even our Air Force members are always happy to live in tents, and we will do so if there's nothing else to live into. And as we mount the brigade over there, I think the critical infrastructure we need to have a combat-capable brigade, to which, in order to do deterrence, we need to exercise. We need to show Russia on the other side that we're ready to jump in. The critical infrastructure we're looking for is a training range, training infrastructure, which is not solved for now. So if headquarters are not there like we did in 2017, we'll continue to operate out of temporary shelters. We're happy to do this. I think the critical piece is how do we create the link between all the bases and the training range that they're looking at right now to bring our equipment? How do we bring our tanks to the field? How do we bring our ammo to the field? How do we train together with Latvians? So Latvians are an amazing partner, and we're discussing weekly with them, actually daily in theater. And we're happy with the way it's going, but there are some pieces of the infrastructure that will be critical for that brigade to be combat capable, and tentage is fine with us. It's just a matter of how we're going to train.
So you mentioned upper tanks again when we're going to move, I guess, a company of tanks there, right? One thing that's come out through the reporting on the tanks that we donated to Ukraine, and also trying to gear up to have enough tanks to train here as well as deploy forward into Latvia with our Leopard 2s, is that the state of repair and maintenance on our Leopard 2s is left wanting. Are we doing the heavy overhaul and maintenance on our Leopard 2s to ensure that what we have left is operational, and especially we're down on numbers? And is there any plans to replace Leopard 2s that we did donate to Ukraine for our own Canadian Armed Forces?
So on the first part of the question there, so we are working on our tanks. I mean, we're just sending 8 tanks right now to Latvia because we do need to preposition tanks, like you mentioned, what we call a squadron of tanks. These ones are ship-shape. Now we're working on making sure that the train, because we sent 8 in Ukraine, we're sending some to, sorry, it's more than 8, it's actually 19, I believe. I'll have to come back on the number. But we're sending those tanks to Latvia. The ones we have in Canada are also being well maintained to make sure, to the best of our ability, in order to train there. On the question, the first question of the spending reduction, we are going through the analysis right now. The one thing we're not touching on the spending reduction is the money that's been allocated to our operations there. So there shouldn't be an impact to what we do in Ukraine or what we do in Latvia in what we're looking into the spending reductions right now. Time?
One of the developments, we've been talking about the scarcity of shells from the Ukrainian side. We haven't talked about the scarcity of shells from the Russian side. And Mr. Putin went on bended knee to Mr. Kim in North Korea to beg for shells, in part because the Russian supply is either dwindling or it's junk, one or the other. They haven't maintained the fuses and et cetera, et cetera. So I'd be interested in this development because this is bringing a European war into Asia and Asia feeding into a European war. So it has geopolitical implications, but it also has practical implications on the ground. If the Russians are running out of shells, I don't know what the implications are. So you're the experts. What are your thoughts on this latest development with Kim and Putin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very interesting question, and one, of course, we look at and study. There's been a lot of commentary about Russia having to go hand in hand to, its dwindling number of friends and allies, and in particular Iran and North Korea as well. Coming out of that meeting between Russia and the DPRK, there were no, from what I know, arms deals announced, but of course we can speculate what was discussed. We will certainly, hold Russia's feet to the fire in terms of taking any actions that violate UN Security Council sanctions, which would be the case if they do make an arms deal with North Korea. With Iran, we know there's been reports, of course, of deals struck as well, weapons found inside on the battlefield in the theater. It is not surprising that Russia is going to these countries to ask for weapons. They have only some, means of supply. They are not able to, from, erstwhile friends such as China, for example. We know that's been discussed as well. There have been no arms deals discussed.
It's interesting that the Chinese are not supplying the Russians with armaments.
Correct. It is, and we will continue as well to publicly remind China of its own obligations and ensure that it doesn't become complicit directly militarily in the conflict in Ukraine.
Just quickly from D&D's standpoint, what is the strategic/tactical implications of limitations on supply of shells? From the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chair, the same message here is that we need to continue all the alliance together, the partners that are involved in the fight, to continue to galvanize the industry, work with our governments to continue to feed that fight.
It is a singularly unsatisfactory answer. But I will let you off the hook and go to another question, which is that Elon Musk seems to like to turn on his satellites and turn them off. And I'm interested in your views as to what limitation this might have on the ability of the Ukrainians to mount operations if, in fact, they don't have reliable satellite services. You did mention this in your opening remarks about Canada supplying satellite information, but I don't know that they're actually services. So do you have any comments on that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Maybe to go back to an earlier question about lessons learned, one of the things I think we've seen in this conflict is the importance of software in addition to just platforms. And so, this question of the ability for a foreign government or a company to alter some of the equipment, I think speaks to the importance of ensuring that we have not just access to the platforms that we need, but also, the ability to manage the software that's part of that. And I think it's something that we need to keep looking at as we look at sort of future procurements. And it's going to be an increasingly, I'm more in the general space here, but an increasingly information-driven future of conflict, and we need to be able to manage that information space, which includes the software elements of that.
Okay. Thank you. Unfortunately, my time is up. If I'm going to make my colleagues adhere to time, I have to adhere to it myself. But I just wanted to offer on behalf of those of us who traveled, one of the most impressive presentations was on cybersecurity from the UN representative. We have a lot of lessons to learn from these folks, and if we collectively have any advice to give, it would be that we put some people in with within the cybersecurity people we saw in Latvia. Anyways, with that, colleagues, that brings us to the first hour and a half of our 2 hours. I want to thank you, friends, for coming and briefing us. We appreciate your service, and I say that not lightly. It is a very difficult geopolitical situation in which we find ourselves with immense personal implications, many personal implications in this room. So again, thank you for your presence, and no doubt we will see you again. With that, we will suspend, go into in camera, and because I always forget to bang the gavel, there we are. Thank you.